you know about CSAW? You participated?
No, but
No.
helpful.
Okay, you guys should Google CSAW, CSAW. It's a security competition that thousands of students will compete.
Is anybody here from the graduate security group in Maryland?
Yeah.
Because that's also a large group here, it's about 100 people. And the graduates of the collaborative. It's a student forum group on security. Mostly the graduates. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't know what the acronym is, but I know the doctors sometimes don't.
Okay. So I'll talk today about a very sort of a common problem that all of you deal with every day, and that's user authentication. So in any system, there's a notion of identity. Every subject or object is assigned an identity, and identities are not secret, right? Typically, for example, the way we humans identify people is by their physical their physical characteristics, and it's not secret. I mean, this is what Jane Fonda. This is what Jane Fonda looks like, and even if I want to somehow impersonate her, it will be hard for me to replicate her identity, right? I may hire the best plastic surgeon in the world, but he won't make me as good looking like her, no matter how much of an expert he is. But nevertheless, identities are not secret. Some are harder to replicate, some are easier to replicate. Like your email account is an identity, and anybody can simply use that and claim to be you. So in that case, authentication then is that process that we incorporate in the system that binds an identity to a subject. So you claim to be Memon when you log into your university computer, and well, anybody could type in Memon at umd.edu or whatever, and so now you need to provide some way to authenticate yourself, to bind yourself to that identity that you are claiming. Right? And identity is needed for accountability, access control, and things like that. Now, there are two types of authentication that are typically done in a system. One is computers authenticating computers, right? When a server is talking to another server or something of that sort, when updates are taking place. And we do that by means of cryptographic protocols, right? And we have good tools in cryptography, good machinery in there to be able to do this reasonably well. As long as the implementations are correct, we have good protocols here. On the other hand, we also have this particular type of authentication where a human is trying to authenticate to a computer, right? And the different ways of doing it, if you've done a security course, the standard thing they say is, well, there are three standard approaches to this. One is something you have, something like a phone that sort of you get a text message to and you sort of type that password in, or you authenticate yourself by demonstrating that you actually possess that physical token. And the physical token is very widely used in enterprises as part of a two-factor authentication, where your password is whatever this number is on the screen, and it's changing every minute or so. And you keep it with you when you want to log in, you type that number in, right? And the server synchronizes with this. So this is one approach to take. Of course, the problem with this is that it can be stolen, right? Second is that it can be a nuisance to carry around, right? So there are different systems. For example, there was a joke about in Wall Street, people walk around with a garland of dongles. They have like one dongle for every system that they're trying to log on to. So over time, it sort of became a little bit cumbersome. But nevertheless, it is used. And because of the fact that we are carrying a phone around a lot more today, it's increasingly being looked at as a possible way to authenticate people, right, by means of their phone. The problem there is the phone runs out of battery very often. I don't know, my iPhone doesn't seem to last through the evening. By 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, it's dead. So then if you cannot authenticate yourself, you have an issue. The second approach is something you inherently are, like a biometric, a physiological biometric, is very common, fingerprint, face, and things of that sort. The problem with those is, first of all, they were expensive to capture in the past. you needed a special sensor to be able to capture a fingerprint, or you needed a camera to capture the face and things of that sort. But again, with the smartphone, these sensors are more and more coming for free. The vendor simply knows you have it. They simply have to provide software that Bank of America might provide you software by using which you can authenticate yourself with your face or with a selfie or something of that sort. So, nevertheless, the problems with these are that physiological biometrics are things that you cannot change. Right? So that may allow vendors to track you, for example. If your fingerprint gets stolen, somebody may be able to replicate it. And also, physiological biometrics are not a secret. Right? My face is not a secret. My fingerprint is also not a secret. People have shown that there are ways to simply even capture it from a photograph and then replicate the fingerprint. Right? And so those are the issues with them. But again, nevertheless, they are becoming more and more. They're being increasingly considered to authenticate people these days. So we'll get into that a bit later. And then the other approach is something you know, right? A secret in your head. Somebody has to torture you to get it out of you. It's safe in your head. You can change it. You can have different secrets for different types of accounts. And just by knowing that secret, unlike knowing the biometric, people cannot track it, right? You just have a pseudonym and a password that doesn't necessarily identify you. The problem with that, of course, is that they tend to get, and we'll get into, there are many problems with this, and we'll get into that a little bit. But nevertheless, they are the most widely used mechanism today, this type of authentication mechanism, and essentially passwords, right? The problem with passwords is that we tend to choose passwords that are easy to guess, right? And that leads to what is called a dictionary attack, where the attacker essentially keeps a long list, generates a long list of likely passwords, and once the password file is compromised, because your password is stored somewhere in the system, when you enroll, you provided a password. When that file is compromised, the attacker can do a brute force attack of some sort, trying all the possible ones from a well-compiled dictionary, and is able to then crack your password. Right? And there are techniques called rainbow tables that allow you to do that very, very efficiently. So we've come to a stage where if you have an 8-character password, random, okay, alphanumeric, forget it. It can be cracked. It can be cracked if the password file is stolen, no matter what it is, forget about guessable, dictionary, etc., etc. It can be cracked just by brute force, by enumerating all of these 8-character possibilities, right? We've reached that point. So 8 characters are not good anymore, you need to have about 14 characters or so. So, of course, there are ways to sort of make this cracking harder. Those of you who have taken a course in computer security, and I was assuming that to some extent, know that there's something called a salt, that you attach a salt to every password file, every password in the password file, a unique salt. So then what the attacker has to do is create different rainbow tables for every different salt value. So it makes it more difficult for the attacker to crack passwords, right? So once I get Yahoo's 400 million passwords, I have to bring 400 million different rainbow tables, and that's not practical, right? So, but if they want to crack your password in Yahoo, saying, okay, Memon and some password, they can go after it and build a rainbow table just for that, right? So, but it makes them work harder. But if you look at it, industry folks are really not doing that, right? So when some of the recent leaks, about 3-4 years back, so many million passwords were leaked, and just a couple of them had sorted their passwords, which is disgusting, right? And these are not small companies, these are companies like LinkedIn and things like that, which Cupid Media, okay, nobody cares, whatever password that is. But the problem, of course, is that that password is possibly your bank password or your Facebook password as well, right? Or your Yahoo password as well. So that would be an issue. They didn't even bother to do anything with the password file. And that's also given a lot of leeway to the attackers, because now they have large collections of real passwords, and they've built very efficient sort of these dictionaries which they use in order to crack passwords. So passwords are becoming more and more of a nuisance. So what is the response? oh, the administrators tell you, change your password every 3 months, and then they force you to make it different from the last password, and they basically harass you more and more, forgetting the fact that they are the ones who are losing the password, not you. Right? When do you lose your password? You lose your password when you give it away, nicely. When somebody asks you, claims in a phishing attack, somebody says, hey, I'm Microsoft, whatever, or sends you a link saying something has happened, you click, page comes up, username, password, you type it in, and you happily give it away to them. And at that point, the complexity doesn't matter. Right? It could be a 28-character password, it doesn't matter, you're giving it away. But whereas choosing stronger passwords doesn't help you there, right? Choosing stronger password helps you when these guys, the servers, the vendors who store your password, don't do a good job and it leaks, right? For that particular situation, they should be, and I could go on for 1 hour about different things here, they should be spending more time and effort keeping these password files more secure. Instead, they're focusing on you to sort of change your password, make it longer, don't share it, and things like that. So passwords have become the bane of sort of modern existence, right? They've become a nuisance to deal with. Nevertheless, they're hard to replace. There are people who have announced a war on passwords. Yahoo's CEO said, we will banish passwords. And the government, the White House announced that we will banish passwords. Passwords are still here. They're not going away, right? And they may not go away for a long time. And there's a nice paper, I recommend you to read it, by Bono Hurley, who did a good analysis of the different alternate approaches that people have tried, and compared it against simply a 4-digit PIN or a 6-digit PIN, which is like a password, right? And they kind of argued, they looked at characteristics of the different alternatives that have been proposed. And they listed characteristics of passwords and what characteristic of a good, what you know authentication technique should be. And going through all of them, they basically made a very clear argument that passwords are still superior. We don't have good alternatives for them as yet. Okay. Given these characteristics, usability, and we'll get into some of these a bit later when we look at alternatives. But I recommend you read the paper. And also, of course, there's a cost to changing, potentially. But it's not as if we didn't try, right? We've tried. We've tried biometrics, for example, for a long time. Biometrics work fine in a controlled environment. When you're going through the airport immigration, you put your fingers, somebody's watching you, that's fine. You go to your enterprise and you may use your iris or whatever to log in, again a fingerprint scanner, again in a controlled environment. When somebody's watching you enter it, then they work reasonably well. But otherwise you have problems. Otherwise you have problems because biometrics are not a secret, right? And they can be spoofed. So,
but you can make them a secret by thinking that you revise and extract it.
That if you can do that, that would be very, very good.
That's what we've done here.
Yeah, that would sort of
because
then it would be a different fingerprint depending on the device that you are providing it. You can link it that way. That would be very useful. The other approach of what you have.
I don't know if you have comment that people have said that I can do a modern version of scrambling, meaning I can take the biometrics, analyze what pieces still, if I scramble them, can be used. And now I add
that's for storing in the server. That's for storing in the server.
Yeah.
At the capturing time, see what happens is that's for storing in the server. So in case where the biometrics are stored, that gets compromised.
I take it, I break it,
I scramble it, yeah.
and then I combine it in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's a new essence.
That's against server compromise, right? But when but not against spoofing. Right? I can make a glove, and I'll talk about that a bit later, containing a fingerprint, and then I go there and I use it.
The story all day we were worried that somebody would cut your finger. Then
Yeah.
you went to silicon.
Right.
Fingers. When they came to put the silicon in the glass,
Right.
that's when the German did it with the phone.
Right.
So still, but the issue is, I can take the thing
You can spoof it because it's not
and
public.
then use it for the computer as an external input, and I cannot recognize it because I don't identify where it was taken.
Yeah. And especially in unsupervised situations, right? When you're doing it on your own, on a phone or something like that, who knows
is
what
there a
is
problem
happening?
with the non-robustness of biometrics? Like
The what?
the non-robustness, for instance, I was in a TI.
The number of bits are smaller then, like one fingerprint would have.
Safe voice identification, right? So, you know the old stuff, I do have abracadabra, John Barras, open the door, right? So I was run down at Texas Instruments, maybe 2 a.m. I had now a call.
Oh, sure.
And you won't let me in.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
So how do you fight that? Because, or you say your finger is has oil or is dirty,
Right.
or your eyes is dry.
Sure. Sure. That's another disadvantage
issue,
of biometrics, right? But it, and like with iPhone, when your hands are wet, for example, it doesn't.
Is that a big
catch
issue?
the
You
signal.
think?
It's not a big issue because the false rejects sit in the 1-2% category. So over time, I mean, one gets to understand whether these things are big issues or not if they're deployed at a large scale. Only then you get to understand that, right? And over time, the iPhone is showing that, well, it looks like fingerprint seems to be working. I mean, I use it all the time. Except in the rain when I have to like wipe my hands dry or something like that. Or I just say forget it and use the pin instead. But it seems to work most of
And
the
then you
time.
have this other one that they read your blood vessels. Okay, so the
Yeah.
one.
But they've not been deployed at a large scale.
In Brazil, in the past.
Oh, that's
You
there?
put the thing against the door.
Okay.
They read your blood vessels.
Okay.
That was a big commercial success. Okay. Which is then the dancing has the thing.
Right.
They claim that I haven't tested that. They claim that your blood vessels, after you are 4 or 5 years old, you don't change. Basically.
Right. And those are actually more interesting because those are more secret. Your face, somebody can get, fingerprints people can get, irises also at a distance people have started acquiring, but blood vessels,
Also, these
unless
are
you
more
have.
robust because they don't depend on the surface. You can't get dirty,
Right.
but the sensor actually finds the best.
So blood vessels, they're not affected by it.
Thank you.
So the other approach, of course, is something that you carry around, and people have tried that. Google tried that, second two-step verification, where they were trying to, with a vendor, market this for Google Mail, whereby you would put that dongle in and then type in your password every time. So you carry something around. And there are some very smart people think that maybe in the future they will embed some chip inside your hand or something of that sort that will authenticate you somehow. Right? Don't know. Or you'll be wearing a bangle, or you'll be wearing a earring, or something of that sort that will authenticate it, some jewelry. But again, people have tried, not really happy, right? And when someone like Google's tried and not happened, that means it's difficult to really deploy in a large scale. And then academia, there have been a million of different sort of approaches. There have been sort of many different approaches, and I'll describe a few of them. But none of them have worked. But I think things are maybe ready for a change. Things are changing in some sense. One is that the interface is changing. Now we have new, what we call natural computer interfaces. We no longer, I mean, passwords were kind of made sense when you had a keyboard to interact with the computing device. Now we do that by voice, we do that by gestures, and there are many such user interfaces that are appearing, and also variable computing, where many devices like a Fitbit or a watch or something, many of the glasses. I think Snapchat has come up with a video glass that you put on and you can take a Google Glass, I'm sure will come back. Microsoft has that holodeck. So augmented reality will make us wear a lot of these computing devices. And there, the interface is different, right? There's no longer, password doesn't sort of make sense then. So things like touch surfaces, things like the camera-based interface in the Kinect, right? Where you gesture in front of the Kinect or whatever in order to, and that it captures that by 3D, getting a 3D image of by using multiple cameras and getting a depth sensing cameras. Also things like Google Glass I talked about. And also there are these gesture interfaces where you have, there's a leap device to connect. It's like a USB dongle about that size. And it has 3 LED lights in there, infrared, and 2 cameras. And then when you're waving your hand, the LED light sort of reflects back and the cameras capture it at a very high frame rate, 100, more than 100, I forget what, and actually get your gestures. So you could be sitting in front of a computer saying this, 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 and you could be gesturing, scrolling instead of using the mouse or touching anything at all. So interfaces of that type are also coming up. The other issue is mobility, right? So before, when passwords were devised, you were sitting in a room with your computer, and there were not many people around you, and you were entering your password, and you were interacting with the computer in more or less private or semi-private like situations. Now you're doing it more and more in very open public spaces, right? You're carrying your phone, you're typing in your PIN. I'm sure your little brother knows your PIN, right? Because he or she, your little sister knows your PIN, because he or she has seen you type it so many times. Or your other half knows your PIN because they've seen you do it. And maybe you don't want your little brother to be reading your text or your snap, whatever things that you have on the phone, right? So the more and more so it's not just malicious attacks, but even what I call curious insiders, people around you would get to know your password if you're using a mechanism like PIN or a password and things of that sort. So that mobility is also changing things. And also there is this notion of continuous authentication that's coming in, which they're saying that, hey, we should be not authenticating people at the time of entry, only when they want to log in, but we should be authenticating them continuously, right? So my cell phone knows more about me than my wife does, right? Because it knows where I am all the time. It can turn on the microphone, hear everything that I speak. It sees all the messages, email, everything it knows about me. And I may forget my wife and kid at home, but I wouldn't forget my cell phone, right? It's always with me in my pocket. So then the idea then would be that you have an authentication platform where you're trying to access the bank, and the bank say, hey, is this really Nasir? Cell phone says, I don't know, seems to be in the right place at the right time. I heard him speak 2 seconds back, his voice was right, it was okay, or something of that sort. The bank said, no, I want to be sure. So okay, turn on the camera, let's look at his face. Yeah, so you can use multiple of such factors to have a kind of a fluid notion of authentication, right? If you're just reading, going to the web and browsing New York Times or something, who cares who you are, right? Doesn't matter. But the moment you try to sort of use a sensitive service or use then the bar gets raised, and you have these multiple sensors, and they may pick up your identity and provide a fused result of some sort. So again, this is not happening, but there's talk about in the future you might do things of this sort.
So for this particular problem, is there, because you're fusing information, you're adapting fusing, is there a problem to do this correctly? Because typically if you do fusion not carefully, you will end up with a lot of false alarm.
Right.
So is this a problem?
First of all, there's no good implementation of this that I've seen. People are just ideas. So biometric fusion that people do, two-factor biometrics, multiple biometrics, where you look at face and fingerprint and voice and fingerprint and things of that sort. Or multiple fingerprints also, you can think of them as fusions. There people have studied that more carefully. But things like my location and my what I said 5 minutes back, the email I sent, etc. All that was hard. And the phone can also do ear recognition, right? Because when I hold it like this, ear is also a biometric. There's some sense, some amount of uniqueness in it. So in these contexts, there are many different approaches that are being investigated, that have been proposed, mostly in the academic world, some in the industry as well. And you can categorize them. So I started looking at this, and you can sort of categorize them according to the interface itself, whether it's a touch interface, it's a camera interface, it's a motion interface, it's a voice interface, or it's a brain-computer interface as well, right? So you could think of these five kinds of interfaces. And when I'm interacting with that interface, I can use my fingers and hands or face or voice or my thought or my entire body, right? And again, it could be more, but you could categorize these in this way, or my actions in that way. And the green cells are where you've started seeing things coming up. I mean, there are authentication techniques proposed that sort of a particular type with a particular interface. And the whole bunch of this, so when I started sort of looking at these, collected about 140 papers, right? And just in these sort of areas, 140. So there's a lot of work that has been done. And so we said, okay, let's look at them, and you could evaluate them for security and for usability, right? Those are the two important things when you're looking at an authentication scheme, how secure it is and how usable it is, right? So security, you want to look at whether it can withstand random guessing, whether it gives too many false positives, or because that's bad, that means other people can impersonate you. Whether it's susceptible to shoulder surfing, somebody standing next to you can see you enter that, authenticate you, and thereby impersonate you. Whether it's susceptible to what we call insider threat, or what I talked about, your little brother or whatever, someone who sees you repeatedly will eventually learn it. Or whether it's susceptible to being recorded by a camera and then replayed somehow later, right? So those are the things you have to look at when you look at a technique. And when it comes to usability, first of all, how easy it is to memorize, because how easy it is to do it again and again and again, sort of come up with the same protocol for authentication from the user's point of view. How many true positives you have, because you don't want false negatives, right? Because then it's not usable. Because you say, try to get in and say, no, 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 you say, to hell with it, and throw it away. I started using two-factor authentication, and it was just too painful for me to do. And even Apple just started two-factor authentication, and it was just too painful. I said, just the next day I canceled it. I said, to hell with it, because it wanted me to go to the website, wanted me to create a specific app-specific password, copy it, paste it in the app, and then access it. Who the hell wants to do all that? Right? So it needs to be efficient. It needs to be something that, and there are also notion of satisfaction in the sense that some techniques that we look at, they inherently are pleasing. It's fun to do. Right? Taking a selfie may be a fun thing to do. Right? So that element is there. And universality, or in the sense, can everybody do it? It shouldn't be such that, so fingerprints, for example, they did a large-scale fingerprint capture in India. They captured fingerprints of 1 billion people. They came up with this universal ID. And 1 billion people, they have got their 10 fingerprints and irises as well, right? And that was not for monitoring or things of that sort, simply for fraud prevention. Because make sure that right people are getting the right benefits. And when they did that, first they were going to just fingerprint, but when they did that, there were lots of farmers and people who worked a lot with their hands. They had no fingerprints. Oh, gone, right? If you do a lot of manual labor, your fingerprints really could, I mean, you could have a very vague, very faint fingerprints, which are not useful for authentication.
So the values in the...
Yeah, so it's gone, yeah.
Because of works and...
Yeah, because
chemicals,
what all they do with the hands, and a very large number of people. Then they also started adding irises. So let's look at these techniques, and let's look at the touch interface first. One of the earliest touch interface-based authentication scheme was this Google lock pattern. Where you draw a pattern, you have a grid, 3x3 grid, and you draw something. And actually, it's an instance of what we call draw a secret. So you're drawing a secret. Many such schemes in academia have been proposed. Even you can draw random things and things of that sort. But so this seemed to have about, I forget now, about 20 to 30% Android users use this pattern unlock on their phones. Right? So it seems to have caught on. People are finding it to be usable, but there are problems with it. First, almost everybody starts on the upper left corner, right? And there are very few patterns that, so when the large-scale study was done, there are very few patterns that people actually use. Right? So doesn't have, so the random guessability is high. You can actually guess somebody's password because the number of different combinations that people use are very little. I tried nudging people, so I did an experiment where I had the dots blinking, like thinking that maybe they'll start there. They just ignored it. Then I drew a circle around the dot, or maybe changed the dot to a heart or something, or changed the color to red, or nothing affected them. They always went for the upper left corner. They always came up, in the majority, not all. They tend to go to the upper left corner and drop from there. If you remove the upper left corner completely, then they start at the lower left corner. Right? So the randomness, the entropy here is on the lower side. Second, it's not resistant to what's called shoulder surfing. John can't sit down and do that right now because you'll be able to see exactly what his pattern is. It's also, it leaves smudges behind. Because you're doing that again and again, people have shown that if I can, by looking at the smudge on the screen, I'm able to figure out what the pattern is. Windows 8 came up, but nevertheless it's there, it's being used. Right? Windows 8 came up with a picture password, I had done something like that a few years before it, where basically the technique I had where click on points. You're given a picture, click on 5 points, and that's your password. Right? And the idea is that we as humans have evolved with a very highly sophisticated visual system, right? As opposed to the ability to remember random alphanumeric strings, we remember, process, and remember information visually very, very efficiently.
Especially faces.
Yeah, faces especially. In fact, there was a scheme where you're shown 20 faces and 3 of them your password.
Oh.
And you select which 3. So that's, but again, just 3 out of 10 is not enough entropy, so you do that many times. So the efficiency issues were there. It's a scheme like that. But anyway, Windows 8 came up with this. So the idea was not just points, but drawing a circle or a line or a tap, any of the 3, right, on the picture. And I don't know why. I should dig into this more. Maybe call somebody in Microsoft and find out, but they discontinued it in Windows 10. It's not there anymore. But nevertheless, while it was there in Windows 8 with the Surface, you could do that because it was a touch screen on the Microsoft Surface. People showed that, again, when you're given a picture, what do you circle? The face. What do you tap on? The nose or eyes. So again, it's very, very predictable. And it doesn't have high entropy. Again, it's not susceptible. It's susceptible to shoulder surfing. Even from a distance, I can see what your password is, and maybe for those reasons it didn't take off. I myself tried around the same time come up with a scheme where you just sign, right? So you have a phone, and we all know how to sign. We just say, okay, I can sign in my sleep. I can just do the same signature, and there's some amount of consistency to it. Right? So my signature would then be my password. Right? Not just the static picture of the signature, but the way I draw it. Because I draw it with a particular speed, with a particular flair. I press harder on a particular stroke and I press lighter. And so all that can be captured. It's called online signature verification. So you can capture all that. And it turns out what we were arguing, it's a behavioral biometric. Right? So in the sense that it captures my behavior in performing a certain task. And it's hard for somebody else to replicate it. In fact, we did studies where we draw animation of it and made people practice it, signing, practice for as long as they felt comfortable. Then we asked them to try. And the success rate was 10%, which was not very high. Right? Of course, you want it lower than that. But the point is that even with such an adversary who can capture your signature on a video and then play a recording of it and practice for a day or something like that, the success rate was still only about 10%. So again, I made an app, I put it up on the iPhone saying, okay, password locker, this was like 4 or 5 years back, probably I was making only $20 a day, not even enough for coffee for the 5 students who were involved. So we just dumped it and we said forget it, because somehow it never caught up. Right? I don't know why, but it's, again, this has resistance to shoulder surfing. It has reasonable, the entropy depends, right? So you can say that people know your signature. Right? So people can see that signature and then try to replicate it. They can get a static. So Shoulder surfing, the casual shoulder surfer, no, but your little brother knows your signature, and they may be able, because they see it so many times. And you can change your signature. On Amazon, you can write Amazon. On Yahoo, you can write Yahoo. Whatever, you can do that in a unique way. Of course, there were issues of false negatives, because you had to be careful. There were also issues of if I'm walking, so actually a large company approached me saying they wanted to use this. And the guy showed it to this, later on he told me he showed it to the CTO, and the CTO drew a circle. And then he gave it to the other guy, and he gave it to this other guy who was standing next to him saying, copy me. And of course the guy drew a circle, of course he said, oh, this is no good, throw it away, right? But, so there is this notion of, this similar to the 1, 2, 3, 4 as your password, right? So then there is this notion of, you need to have a complex, how do you prevent users from doing that? Right, so you need to have some notion of complexity of a signature. Also, if you do some crazy, fancy signature, then consistency comes into play. Because you may not be able to do that all the time. But the same company, they gave it to somebody in one of their engineers or whoever, R&D folks in Japan was trying it out, and she was in a train while doing it. It didn't work. Right? Of course, but you could compensate that for that potentially by looking at the accelerometer and seeing that it's shaking, and then use that in order to do a better match. But there are issues that it has to be used in a more stable environment. There is a notion of complexity of the signature. Not all signatures will work. And there's the issue of adversary who can record it and then replay it as well.
Can't you use like pressure or smudge points to fix it?
Pressure also can be used. Yes.
Yeah, because that would be a little differentiation, because where I stop with my Y would be different from where you stop with your Y. So even if you try to copy my Y for Yahoo, it wouldn't be the same, right?
But you yourself change it from time to time. You're not doing exactly the same every time, right? So there's some sort of a circle around your template that you have to tolerate, and that becomes a problem. That's where people sneak in. They're not exactly the same, but they might be similar enough. That's the problem. And what that circle should be, conceptually, in feature space, don't know. Right? And your signature may change with time as well. We did that experiment over 2 weeks, and the signature was drifting. It stabilized, but it was drifting. So that, again, makes enrollment a bit crazier, right? Because the way we had built the system, you start, you sign 5 times, that's it, and you're done. But then, you know, if your signature is drifting, then I have to keep track of that, update the template accordingly. And there are no good ways of known for doing this in an optimal kind of way. Because you might drift away. It can be whatever you try to do, an attacker can use it to make you sort of slowly drift away, right, to something that they want you to. So we also then tried writing a PIN. So saying, okay, PIN, your little brother knows it, but they can't write it exactly like you do, right? And also you don't need, so right now I can just do, right? I don't even have to look at it. Right? So it's eye-free in that sense. I can just write it, I don't even have to look at it. The underlying system can recognize the digits, recognize that it's the right PIN. And also, there's a behavioral biometric. The way I write a 6 and a 3, the pressure, the speed, all that is unique to me. And so that can be captured. And even if you know my PIN, you still will not be able to authenticate because of the way I draw. Draw PIN, we called it. Forget about sending it to someone, even the conference rejected it. So I mean, we had to go to a second-tier conference instead. So, don't know. People don't think it's that great an idea. I thought it was kind of cute. And it doesn't even have to show, right? It can be an invisible PIN. So it doesn't have to render on the screen. It's just the pattern that I'm drawing. Yeah. Another cumbersome technique was the Google Glass. So Google Glass for authentication, it had this thing on the side. You would go to tap, tap, swipe, swipe, tap, swipe. That's your password. So like a touching that surface on the side of the glass. And it takes about 7 seconds to log in. But that's the only alternative that I provided. And we came up with some alternatives that I'll show you later. Then the other thing we did was multi-touch gestures, right? So on a larger touch surface, I could do something like swipe. When I do a pinch, for example, right? And when John does a pinch, his hands are very different from mine. And the touch patterns that are generated would be quite different. So we established that, we showed that touch patterns of individuals, they're not unique, but there's sufficient distinguishability in them to be able to at least verify me. So I would go in and then do some touch gesture on the surface. Maybe it would be a free-form gesture. And then I remember that free-form gesture, and that's my password. You might see me do it, but again, it's hard for you to replicate because not just the pattern, but again, my hand suppleness, my hand geometry, the distance between the fingers, and all those play in. And again, there we did experiments where we allowed people to watch and then try and copy, and there the success rate was much lower. Because it was much harder to replicate. And here there was this issue of people found it fun to do, right? Because people like to sort of do these gestures. Gesture interaction is always a pleasing one. And then we also found that there were certain gestures that people did not like to do. So for example, the zoom Z gesture was something that they found unpleasant, whereas a pinch gesture they found pleasant. And I was very surprised as to what's the difference. I spoke to a psychologist and he said, yep, that makes sense because with the pinch you're bringing it close. You're bringing whatever. It's a gesture where you're bringing something close to you. With the zoom, you're like pushing away. Get the hell out of here. And so, and in fact, one of my collaborators on this, she was a human-computer interaction person, and her specialty is in actually gestures and emotion. So actually, gestures and body postures affect your body chemistry and your emotion. So when your mom said, sit straight with your back, like spine straight, and study, she was right. Apparently, your body chemistry is in that posture allows you to pay attention there. And when you see people leaning back in the chair with the legs stable on the table and putting their hands behind, feeling like macho, that's true. When they do that, testosterone is released, and they get that sense of, I'm a macho kind of thing. So postures and emotional states are connected to each other. And we were looking at gestures of that sort, which would make it more fun, right? Because more fun people do it, and then they will do it right, and perhaps they will adopt the style. So that element is also comes in when you're thinking of authentication. Anyway, so that's touch. So it's some sort of sample of different approaches that have been used with the touch interface, as opposed to typing in a password. Right? Typing in a password on a touch interface is very painful. Typing in a password on this is very painful, right? Because you have to go, and then it can't predict. It better not predict your password, so you can't use that prediction capability. And when you have uppercase and lowercase and special characters and digits, you have to change the virtual keyboard all the time. And it's very slow and cumbersome to enter a password, a complicated password like this. So some kind of a touch pattern probably is better to do, but Google's pattern unlock is the only thing we've seen so far. With face, of course, selfies, right? You can always take a selfie, and face recognition has been around for ages. We're very good at it. Facebook, apparently, that deep face has amazing accuracy. You can't see a face in there, I guess. The projector is blurred it out. But there's supposed to be a little face in there. But nevertheless, yeah. So nevertheless, it's something that we can all do quite easily, and there are some companies now that are allowing you to take a selfie to authenticate yourself. Problems, well, of course people see your face, so that's not the issue. Shoulder selfie is not a problem, but they can use a picture of your face. Right? So then there is a cat and mouse game that goes on, saying, well, then I'll make the person blink, and I'll watch for some micro expressions and things of that sort. Well, I can play a video without it, right? Then I say, I look at, and there's a guy in Maryland, Larry Davis. He looks at reflection of light, and based on that, he's saying, no, there's a problem here. It seems to be a rebroadcast of some sort. But it's not easy detecting that. So there's a cat and mouse game going on between detecting a live instance of it and a replayed instance of it. Right? When the threat model is low, where you really don't care, it's just your Facebook account. I mean, who cares? I mean, the NSA is not going to try and get into your Facebook. The adversary is simply your little brother, then it's fine, it works. Right? But as your adversary gets more skilled, it's more and more difficult to sort of detect the replay of the face. In fact, there's an application available both on iOS and Android, and it kind of says that face recognition is less secure than a battle rock. It kind of warns the people up front that, hey, this is not very secure. But it's kind of fun, taking a selfie of yourself to authenticate and feel, wow, it actually recognized me. We went a little bit further. We said, okay, when you have a camera, instead of face, I can do some gestures. So we had that multi-touch gestures, and we said, now we can do like a kung-fu-like gesture in front of the camera. And now it captures my entire body, right? So, and yeah, it does work. And we, again, if you're not going to be doing that with your iPhone or something of that sort, there's only certain social circumstances in which you can do a full body gesture to authenticate yourself. So you're looking at, as you're approaching a door, to unlock the door as you're walking in, you just do that and the door opens, right? So that was one of the use scenarios. And we did that experiment, and we did a Wizard of Oz kind of an experiment. There was somebody behind opening the door. It wasn't automated, but and people had lots of fun. But of course, you're carrying the coffee in your hand, you can't do this. So it's kind of fun. We showed it can be done, that you can distinguish gestures. Same gesture, if somebody tries to copy, you can tell them apart very easily, right? Even if they're the same shape and size as you, roughly, because the way you do it is different. So this has been looked at.
Have we tried, okay, so in vision, if I want to recognize the face, there's an old problem that I don't think can be resolved, is the aspect problem, the view problem.
Well, the face, I forgot to mention all that. Oh, the pose, yeah. So face recognition, you see in movies that works, but actually depending on the distance and the illumination, and so it works fine in immigration or whatever, when you go for passports or something like
that. I don't
that.
think you can capture from a photo. In other words, if I have a 3D picture of you, which I can construct by taking three aspects and do a multi-resolution, and they use this, I don't know if it's this machine to get in, and you get back a crystal with your face embedded in it, and you show that crystal. And I have it.
Oh, okay. So you do a...
Yeah, they scan you and then they reconstruct. Okay. So if you have a three-dimensional picture of the same, the photo doesn't work.
Yeah.
Sure. Because if you show a photo, you can only reconstruct. Yeah. So I can do that.
But the thread model is, again, if it's used for just securing something,
the point is
less value.
How you're going to get multiple views from a single camera in the actual application. You have to take your selfie and go like this. Okay?
So does anybody use it? Has anybody using selfie for authentication yet? Please?
So I know some of the Chinese
Baidu or someone is...
Chinese company like
Baidu does.
bank companies.
Bank, they're allowing that.
They really need your selfies for any
So
important transaction.
what I'm saying is something different. Okay? So the way I would do it is if I get this, not a single photo, go like this.
Like this, right?
And that gives me the 3D
Yeah.
ability to reconstruct. And now that's much stronger.
Yes. And in fact, there's a paper exactly about using that for spoofing
Oh, okay.
and defeating this. I'll send you a copy. I haven't read it, my student told me about it. So there's a paper exactly for spoofing. They build a 3D model and then spoof it. Right? But the company is doing that, and enrollment is a problem as well, right? Because face recognition works and as long as John was saying, the conditions are uniform. If it's dark, the lighting is varied, you put in a nightclub and there's like lights flashing and stuff, forget it, it's not going to work. If it's dark, it's not going to work.
So then you go back to Mars conjecture, okay? And remember this book of the reactive type of loop, where basically he said there is a way to capture specific edges in the face that are absolutely indistinguishable. The best example of that, you could take his face, right? And when they make these caricatures of politicians, you immediately know what they're talking about. So that essentially is a very practical application of Mars conjecture, which said that the face can be completely reconstructed with high accuracy
with just
by
the
multiple
cardinal
scale edges. Okay?
Right.
So you could get away from this problem with lighting and all that stuff. You can extract.
But it's the lighting that prevents you from extracting.
But if you come to extract, yes.
And so face recognition is something you'll see being used more and more, because I think it's just.
But if I take what you said, the extrapolation means the only future is I get a complete MRI and then I can do this.
Yeah.
So,
It checks your genome.
So in this case, we can apply a similar idea in the security. Basically, we can add a tag to the message. Basically, the message is our face, and the tag can be the flashlight, which at position, right? So I can take.
And you have to then enter it? No.
Then basically, I can just turn back of the camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 different positions, and the flashlight position is relative to the camera, and then this is as a additional information to my face, right?
What is the Eisenhower? What is the
So the flashlight at this position, which basically give me a different light,
okay.
non-uniform.
And when you're authenticating, how you're signaling that additional
So
information?
basically, we get 4 pictures, and
That's for enrollment. Are you doing 4 for authentication?
yeah, 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then the whole model, and also verify the light direction.
Or you can do a funny gesture with your face. That could be the second factor. I don't know. Yeah. So you can always signal some side information, additional second factor to protect the face.
How do you prove, I mean, you know people have a lab and do a lot of experiments. One thing that we can try here, you go and the answer, how do you convincingly prove, other than empirical evidence, doing a lot of experiments, that you are actually getting something more secure?
So one is, what do you mean by more secure, right? So
Exactly.
one is notion of entropy.
Only
Yeah, that's,
People
you
try
can do mathematical models and say, okay, there's this much uncertainty. So that's one thing you can do, and for some of these it's been done, for most of them it's not been done. Even for something as simple as the pattern, it's hard to simply come up with a model of what is more likely, what is less likely, and so what's the entropy of that pattern. But people have tried. Some attempts that have been made. And people have tried at looking at the entropy of face, entropy of fingerprint, and things of that sort. But again, based on large amount of data. Then people have also looked at eye gaze, right? So there was this whole business of shoulder surfing was a problem for a long time, that people can watch you do it. So now your password is leaked, your authentication mechanism can be deprecated. So for ATM, somebody showed that I can stand in front of the ATM and I can look at 2, and then I can look at 5, and I look at 9. And there's computer vision techniques that can capture eye gaze and get the focus of attention of the eye relative to that picture that's being shown to you. And based on that, you can input a secret, and somebody watching you is much harder for them to capture your eye gaze, assuming you don't have a camera in front, right? Because if you're normally in front of an ATM, the camera is behind you or on the side or something of that sort. So even if they're standing next to you, they won't be able to see your eye gaze. So, but the problem with this, of course, is that it just takes too long. Right? I mean, I go to my ATM, I want my money fast, and I'm not going to sit and like stare at the numbers for 30 seconds before I'm able to log in. Another thing, so when you have a private display, like the Google Glass, then you can exploit that. Right? So in the Google Glass, you have something that only you can see. Right? The attacker, shoulder surfer, is not able to see that. So the Google Glass can show you a screen like that, and your actual pin is 1569. Oops, I told you my pin. But the real pin, so what you would say, if your actual pin is 1569, you would say 7034. Right? And there's no information given. Every time if it's scrambled, actually it should be scrambled after 7 again. Right? Because otherwise if they're repeated numbers, that information leaks. Because if my pin was 11, then I would have said 77. And you don't want that information to leak as well. So they're free. So you can just speak the pin based on the scrambling and input your pin for the Google Glass. And people around you won't be able to tell. Right? But then for this, again, you've got to be in a relatively quiet place. Right? You can't do it in a loud sort of place where there's a lot of noise, ambient noise, then you can't do that. But if you have ambient noise, what we said was that we could use this instead. So we could have a again, it's not showing through, but we could have a pin showing on the private display, and then you just, it's scrambled, and you just put your finger and you go like this.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as you can do skin detection and you can detect which part the finger is hitting on, it's a little bit tricky because you have to stay there for a second or so because you need to pass that. And you'll be passing over cells. Just passing over doesn't mean that you're hitting that cell. So you need to create an interface where the color changes as you hit it. And so you stay there till it changes, and it's a fraction of a second, whatever. And you can enter it like that. And so then this whole idea of you could have a single secret, right? Like the pin. And that's all you remember. If it's your phone, you type it in if nobody's around. If somebody's around, you maybe draw it like this quietly. If Google Glass, you speak it. If somebody's around, then you open that. Or if it's loud, then you simply, if it's loud, not if somebody's around, then you use that other mechanism. So you have a single secret, but you enter it using an interface that best suits the context. Right?
So the device can be protected.
Yeah.
The way you enter.
Yeah.
Because that people don't have a device and don't have the same device.
Right. So I think we need to see something like this in the sense we shouldn't make users remember multiple secrets, but we should let the user pick one good secret and allow the user to enter it in different ways depending on the context. Right? Tried to submit a proposal to Google for this and they told me to go away. So I don't know why. Because again, passwords is something
essentially they put the whole glass on the back.
And yeah, that was the same time the glass was pulled out as well, so that was bad timing.
So you think that I don't say. There is a certain effect on the fund of the food that that's why we thought about the show.
Then this third interface is motion interface, right? So we talked about that leap sensor and then camera motion. So leap sensor, people have looked at simply doing some simple sort of gestures of this sort, like circle or move up, down. And the leap sensor captures your hand geometry very well, because very high resolution. And once you have that, you can basically authenticate a person based on the geometry and then the gesture being done. I mean, all these things, I'm just saying, can be done. It requires good amount of pattern recognition, so good amount, maybe sometimes a machine learning technique, a classification technique, or a computer vision technique to detect skin or things of that sort. And it requires understanding of human psychology, human-computer interface. So it's kind of inherently interdisciplinary kind of work when you're trying to devise authentication technique. Leap sensor, people have showed that I can actually write as well, so I can just draw my signature in the air, and the leap sensor will capture it. And, you could do that as well. And again, people have talked about using the phone using the accelerometer to draw a pattern. Right, so you do this, and boom, it's unlocked. Except the phone will go flying off. It's slippery or wet or something like that. So I don't know how practical it is, but people have proposed things of this kind. So whatever you can do with your hand, you can do with holding the phone if there's no camera, right? So just the accelerometer, the gyroscope here, that can capture the movements and be able to authenticate. One of the funniest ones is called the headbanger, and there, again, you have some motion sensor on your head, and then you go like that, or maybe with that one, it plays music, and then you're nodding to the beat, right? It plays a short music, and you're nodding to the beat, and the way you nod, and the way your face moves, etc., it captures that, and is able to authenticate you, because there's some uniqueness to, I guess, some people nod like this, and some people nod like this, and things of that sort. And finally, the most esoteric one, when you want to establish a secret, when you want to authenticate yourself, you just think of something. Yeah. And that's perfectly secure. And so people have done experiments because when there is a thought in your brain holding your, sort of dominating your mind, there's certain electrical patterns that flow in the brain, right? Certain neurons are firing, and that creates an electric field. And if that can be measured well, we can classify saying, yep, you're thinking about that, right? And you've seen amazing stuff on 60 Minutes, I think, where somebody people who have lost their hands, legs, everything, simply can look at look at the computer.
You can fly immediately.
Yeah, okay.
You just think about it, you fly immediately, take it off.
And done, right?
Not really, you can do it.
So more and more, the better we are able to capture, measure the signals, the electric field in the brain, the more we are able to now kind of classify, more finely be able to classify that state. And the more finely be able to classify,
But you need to have
that will be an authentication. So people have come up with, there are consumer ones too, there's something like this.
Oh, there is some.
NeuroSky.
Well, how?
It costs like a couple $100.
How recent is it?
I don't know.
Because the one we use here is a whole basket.
In the last couple of years, that kind of window.
How easy?
I just signed a purchase order, my student buys it.
How accurate is it?
Pardon?
For what type of thing exactly?
So I have not yet done experiments with it, but the paper that talks about it gets about 30% error rate. So it's only getting about 70% accuracy. And the timing also, they have to hold that. So I think they tried an experiment where you take 5 people and say, okay, think about the beach, right? And then they thinking about beach. Now 5 different people thinking about beach, the fields are quite different. Then you say, okay, think about your girlfriend.
And it doesn't matter where I'm in the morning and I'm awake or in the evening and I'm late or something.
No, they haven't done experiments. Yeah. So there's a lot of skepticism around it. I set the example, your other half or whatever, deliberately, because what you think about them might change over time. Same thing with beach, what you think about them, what you think about if you have some weird experience on the beach, then maybe your thoughts will change. So you have to think of very, there was another scheme for re-authentication where the guy PayPal, and actually he told me they were going to implement it, I haven't checked, where when you enroll, right now they ask you mother's maiden name, your dog's name, school, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So he, instead, his approach was, which do you like, broccoli or broccoli or something other, something else equally horrible, carrots. So you say, okay, I prefer broccoli to carrots. What do you like, blue or green? I prefer blue to green. So you give preferences, 20 preferences or 10, 15 preferences, and then when you forget your password and you want to re-authenticate, you don't remember, and at that point, they don't want you to call, right? Because when you call, it costs, even if the call is picked up in Bangalore, it still costs them $35 for your call. If you want to get Yahoo bankrupt, just pick up the phone, all of you, and keep calling them over and over again. And but nevertheless, so they came up with the scheme for re-establishing your identity. That's another interesting problem. Because that, unlike the password you enter repeatedly, right? So you tend to remember it over time. Except when you have 40 of them, then you get confused. But if it's a few secrets, you remember them because you're using it so often, you remember it. Whereas re-authentication is hard. And the things that you remember, everybody knows. Everybody knows your mother's maiden name. Just Facebook might tell you that. Everybody knows you which school you went to. Again, so the things that you remember probably are public information as well. And that's how people get into Sarah Palin's account and CIA guy's account and stuff like that. Not by any fancy hacking. Yeah, they're able to answer these questions. Not by any fancy hacking or something like that. So you need a better scheme for that. So anyway, there's a table where I've summarized these things. If you're trying to get a handle, we still haven't done that, as to what are the sweet spots for what kind of context, right? So if you look at whether it's, depending on the scheme, whether it's eye-free, whether you can do it without looking at it, because sometimes you want to, like when I'm in the meeting with the dean, they're boring, and I want to check my email, but I don't want to put my phone out. So I want to unlock it without looking at the phone, right? So I just want to do it quietly on the table. So there are times when you want to authenticate without looking at it. Right? So eyes-free and hands-free because you might be doing something. All these, especially the wearable devices. Whether you need to be stable, whether it can be while walking and running, things of that sort. Whether it can, forget the hardware part, but whether it can be in a public space, and whether it can withstand a video surveillance camera. Right? There's a video surveillance camera, there's video surveillance cameras everywhere. right? And they are, I'm sure, capturing your pins as you're entering and walking on the street. And people have shown how you can actually capture passwords based on video surveillance camera footage. So those were the kind of threat models, if you will, we were looking at public space and video surveillance. And then you're looking at accuracy as to what kind of accuracy you get. So I won't go through all those details, but I want to end with one thing, the elephant in the room, right? That's this. Probably a few 100 million people are using this now to just use the finger and got my credit card. But whatever, so you can just put down your finger and you go authenticate, right? And why not just use that? Because whenever I try to come up with an authentication technique, people tell me, why not just use that? Why not fingerprints are there, why not just use fingerprints? I keep arguing that first of all, fingerprints are not secret. People can spoof it, right? So that's a big problem. Then they allow you to be tracked, right? So if the thing, someone, I mean, right now, Apple is not letting your fingerprint go, right? But tomorrow, Amazon might say, okay, give us your fingerprint so that we can authenticate it better and reduce fraud, and we'll give you a 50% discount, or something like that. So I actually did an experiment where I had students come in, I had two terminals, I mean, two types of situations they would get into. They would log in to Amazon, we told them we were doing some e-commerce study, we didn't tell them all this. And when they log in, Amazon pops up with a message saying, hey, here is the fingerprint, we had attached a fingerprint sensor to it. Why don't you give us your fingerprint? If you do that, 50 bucks off of your purchase, right? And we wanted to see whether people will do that or not. Or if they do it for 200 bucks or 10 bucks, whatever. Try a different combination. And the other one, it was not Amazon, but Amazon.com. A very shady looking website. We like deliberately made it very ugly and whatever. And we did the same thing. Like, hey, would you give your fingerprint? Turns out, people didn't care. They would give it away to both. The ones who give it away, would give it away to both. But about 60% wouldn't give it. Right? Just saying, no, I don't want to give my fingerprint. So I always had this thinking that your biometrics are you cannot change them, and then you're giving away a part of your identity when you're doing that. Right? And then Amazon has it, and Microsoft has it, and Whole Foods has it, and everybody suddenly has your fingerprints, and someone can track your activity based on that. If that happens more and more. So the tracking issue is there as well, and I thought people would be hesitant to give it. But the other thing that we came up with is, said the third thing is, let's see if we can attack this, right? And we started looking at this fingerprint, and if you have an iPhone, if you enroll your fingerprint, it'll go through a nice little drama where it says, okay, put your fingerprint, put it again, put it again, put it again, you have to put it like many times, and it has a little picture that it's trying to fill up as it's doing that, right? That's all bogus. It's doing no such thing. It's not trying to fill in your fingerprint this way. You think it's like stitching a fingerprint. It's not. Right? What it's doing, according to their patent, is basically getting partial fingerprints. Enough of them. So it gets good coverage on your finger. Okay. So, and then if you keep hitting the same spot, it's kind of looking at it and saying, is it different enough from the previous one? And is it common enough? So there's a reasonable overlap and there's a reasonable non-overlap, then it keeps it. That's why it makes it. Yeah. Yeah. Here, except because you're doing it, it tells you more and more and more. So once actually you should try that too. Don't move it, just keep doing it in the same spot. It'll complain. You say, go catch the corners, you say, yeah, but just keep doing the same spot. After some time it'll say, fine, fingerprint capture. And all it got was like one little spot, right? If you are careful and keep doing it. So what happens then is that, okay, so for each finger, it's keeping, say, k such partial fingerprints. Right? Say 10 maybe, 8 partial fingerprints. Because the sensor is small, it can't have a bigger sensor. Right? And then you have multiple fingerprints enrolled. I mean, I normally have this thumb, and this finger, right? 2, 3 fingers you have enrolled because you're opening it like this, unlocking it that way. So now, suddenly you have 20 or 30 partial fingerprints sitting there. When you want to unlock your phone, you only provide one, right? Because the system doesn't know which finger you're using. It doesn't know which orientation. As long as it matches any of those 30, you're in. From a security point of view, you say that's the big hole, because I don't have to succeed with each one of them. I only have to succeed with 1 out of 30. So we conjectured that are there certain fingerprints which are analogous to the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So suppose I give you my phone, or John leaves his phone behind, and you know the exam is there, and you say, let me try to get it. And when you try to hold the phone is locked, what would you do? You would type in 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's the most. That's what you should do. The chance of success is 4%.
I don't do that.
Which is quite high. So you type in 1, 2, 3, 4, or you type in 3 or 4 such passwords, and they work. Right? And the chances will be 10% or so if you try 3 very commonly used things. Is the same thing true for fingerprints? Can I create a fingerprint pattern that will work? Because right after all, it's doing an approximate match, and not just approximate match to one print, but any one of those 30 prints. And we call this thing master print. Right? So are there master prints out there that are able to unlock magically, so to speak, any fingerprint? And we did, so far we've done this experiment in a limited way with the data set. We haven't actually built a cloud with those fingerprints. We actually did it digitally with the data set, capacitive sensor data set. And we also did a Minutiae-based matching algorithm. We bought the state-of-the-art Minutiae matching algorithm, so matching is not inferior, but we don't know exactly what Apple uses inside. Right?
Well, they use
The matching itself, we don't know. The sensor they bought from that guy.
FBI standard.
The algorithm itself?
The one's a combination of wavelengths and stuff like that.
Okay. So I'll check that.
So,
So this one is the best known commercial fingerprint matcher.
Which is the company of the matcher that you bought?
I'll tell you later. Again, I just signed the purchase
but
order.
the algorithm is known. It's known from the FBI and all the they give you the algorithm and then how good it is to what chips and what algorithm you implement. Because the performance of the implementation is not exactly the accurate performance of the algorithm. The algorithm you cannot beat it, it's the optimal. This was done by years of research by the best people in the country. Then it became the standard. Because when they send your fingerprint to the FBI, they cannot afford to make a mistake. So they made it. That's in
So it's not an open source
That's
one.
your USB
The one we use. The best open source one is not as good as this
Well,
commercial.
that's NBIS actually. The NIST, actually, the NIST released the
No,
Data
you
set.
cannot get from this. And FBI now, in order to release to you, because you can play games with it, they don't give it again unless you have very good clearance.
They probably got it from some vendor.
No.
They have their own.
I was involved with Tom Henderson. This was done, and then it was open for researchers. Now they don't.
Okay.
Because
So now
you
they
can-
don't give it for
Because you
research.
can play games with it. And when you send information, anyway.
Even if I buy you dinner, you won't be able to get it. But yeah, that will be interesting to do it with the real thing, right? And with the real
If you have
fingerprint.
something there,
But what happens is that we found there are 5 fingerprints that could match anybody in the database as long as that person had 8 partial fingers enrolled for 3 fingerprints. Right? Because in our database there are 10 fingerprint or 8 fingerprint databases. So we say that 3 fingerprints are enrolled and there are at least 8 partial fingerprints that are enrolled. So for each one of them, if you have 24 partial fingerprints enrolled, then we create this master print such that any one of these 5 actually match it. Right? So the next step is actually making this golden glove that I go around with. I put it on and I take your phone, I do this, 1, 2, 3, 5, and boom, your phone is unlocked.
not with my,
Potentially.
not with my skin, you won't be able to.
Okay.
Because my sensors,
We'll capture that. We'll catch the spoofing part or will they?
Capture-
Oh, the sensor part.
You capture that the fingerprint was not taken by the sensor that I have, so we're there.
Sure. I mean, sorry, these things always, here also we're trying to come up with ways such that this is not possible, right? So now, what are the optimal ways to get the partial fingerprint? So the idea is not to defeat the thing, the idea is to sort of prevent it and find ways to prevent it. So I just thought I'll throw this out because
Is
it's
this
kind
current?
of a cute thing.
Is this current?
Just submitted the paper,
Okay.
and it hasn't been published yet. Yeah.
Something about, you mentioned about DNA. Do you, okay, kind of maybe futuristic, but do you see DNA sequencing coming as
That'd be a scary thing, no? I think a healthy society needs to provide a way for the citizens to be anonymous and to act anonymously, right? Because if you can never be anonymous, then you have a problem, right? So I think a healthy society should provide them the ability to be anonymous. Once you start hitting DNAs, then you start, I think,
There's actually a very...
we should not allow that
There's a
by law.
There's a group of people studying security of DNA, because this is a very important thing. At this point, they worry a bit for the, what's called the metagenomics clinical study. And now they try to link clinical data to your genome. And that privacy is very strong concern. So probably a byproduct of that will be more security of DNA.
No, but the more, let's say, the human.
Let's take a speaker first.
Sure.